We're here today with Frank John. This videotape is being done at Shaker High School in Latham, New York on October 17, 2002. Frank was born on November 28, 1924. Interviewer is Venezio. I'm the Director of Occupational Education for North County Central Schools and also a member of the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary. And this is part of the Veterans History Project. So with that said, we'll jump right into the interview. Frank, can you tell me, did you enlist or were you drafted, and into what branch of service?
I was drafted into the Army. And
in what year, Frank?
1943. I had wanted to get into the Navy badly, but I'm colorblind. I tried several times, and I said, "Where did you get drafted?" I got drafted into the Army, which is probably just as well because I survived.
That's right. There you go. When you went in, Frank, where did you? So obviously you went into basic training. Where did you take your basic training?
Camp Croft, South Carolina, at an Infantry Replacement Training Center.
Infantry replacement?
Yeah, we're cannon fodder.
So how long were you there in South Carolina?
The training was 17 weeks. From November 43 until about March or April 44. I then was sent home for probably 10 days. Reported back to Fort Meade, Maryland. Started processing for going overseas. And then went to Camp Shanks, which was I won't say secret, but it wasn't known. But it was near the port of New York.
Oh.
And we were there for maybe a week. And we boarded a train at Shanks and probably a half-hour ride down to the ship in New York Harbor.
And then from there?
From there to Scotland. We landed in Scotland. Forgot the name of the town. We boarded a train there. Oh, it was near Glasgow on the western coast of Scotland. We boarded a train and it went over to Edinburgh and then south to England. And we ended up in a camp in Devon, which is down in the southwest corner of England. And this was in April of 45. The day we left the States, there was a big snowstorm. And so we got over there, and of course it wasn't snow, but it's not nice in England in April. and so we stayed there in the camp in Devon. And we hiked and did a little training, keeping us out of mischief, you know.
Now, when you went over on the
it was a tramp steamer. It was rugged, and it's probably, I discovered then it was a good thing I didn't get in the Navy because I was seasick most of the way. Although the North Atlantic isn't nice in that time of year.
Yeah. Now, what were the accommodations like on the ship going over?
We're in bunks about 5 high, as I recall, and as I say, there wasn't much to it. I just slept there, and as I say, I was sick most of the way. So, we'd have to get out. You know, they'd roust us out of the sacks twice a day, once for abandoned ship drill and once for inspection. And then I'd have to go up on top, and green. Well, but I made it.
Was it a long trip over, Frank?
About 10 days.
10 days.
Yeah, we were in a convoy.
Yeah.
sometimes you could see the ships and sometimes you couldn't. The waves were so high, sometimes you just couldn't see them.
Yeah. Once you got to England, what were the accommodations like?
Well,
Where were you staying?
we were in tents, and when we got there, they issued us big mattress covers, and we went down to a supply tent and got straw, filled them with straw, and that was our home, our bed anyway. So, and we slept on cots and tents, and we were there for a couple of months till the invasion, from April until June.
Wow. Now, in that time, so you really were there quite a while.
Oh yeah.
During that time, did you have much contact with home?
Home? You mean here?
Yeah.
No, well, you
Mail?
could write. Yeah. We could write, and I used to use Vmail. And it used to annoy the people at home because it was just one sheet, and we could write on it, and then it would be photographed or microfilmed, I guess, and it could be sent in large quantities easily that way. But of course, when they got it at home, it was just one sheet, and I didn't have too much to say, as I don't now.
Well, it's interesting you say that because someone else had mentioned Vmail.
Yeah.
And of course, our students here misinterpreted that to be email. And so your explanation is helpful. There's a real difference between Vmail and email.
Oh, a big difference, yeah.
That's good. Now,
it was V, I guess, for victory. I don't know. Yeah.
Now, what about what were your mess arrangements there? What was the food like?
Oh, it was good. We had mess kits. These were regular issue mess kits and you'd get in the chow line and get fed. I never complained. It was good food. Yeah, I never complained about Army food. I was, well, you train so much, you're always hungry. You're outdoors and hungry, and you probably eat anything. But as I say, I never complained about Army food.
Now, the couple months you were there, a few months you were there in England, was it largely training time too? Yeah,
it was. We were really biding our time, but we did a lot of hiking. That's what infantrymen do.
Yeah.
We didn't do any. There was no rifle training or anything. We weren't near a range. It was just It was a camp on a windswept hill, and it was cold. But as I say, we hiked a lot, because that was easy.
Yeah. So you were getting ready. You said you were getting ready for the invasion.
That was about it. We knew that.
And what was the attitude of the guys that were there? Were they nervous?
No. No, we're just. I won't say anxious, but we're anxious to, I guess, move on.
Yeah.
At night, well, and during the day too. Yeah. C-47s, which are the military version of the DC-3, which is the early airliner, and they use those to carry paratroops, and they would be flying over with hauling gliders, and these would be training flights, but we didn't know that because they'd be going over a lot, and we didn't know. We'd be thinking, is that it? But when it did happen, they went over. It occurred at night, and there was a lot of these, as I say, flights, pulling gliders. We were still there. That was the early 6th of June, and so we knew that was it. And then we started to prepare to leave then, and well, they issued us live ammunition. But we had our rifles. Our rifles were issued in England, I guess, yeah. And so then they issued live ammunition, so then we knew this is really it.
Yeah. So, June 6, 1945. What happened, Frank?
The invasion?
Yeah.
Well, it happened. We didn't know very much about it, except we knew that it happened. I mean, because everything was in turmoil. We were moving. We boarded a train there and went down to Falmouth, which is way out on the, really the southwest corner of, out near Land's End. And so we boarded a ship there, and we left at night, and we sailed along the coast of England until we got down to opposite where Utah and Omaha beaches were. And then we went across, and it wasn't bad. I slept out on, I had to sleep out on the deck. Everybody, the ships were crowded, and they had a lot of trucks and tanks and things like that, a lot of equipment. So the men were in all the little holes that were left over. So we went over and we landed in Utah Beach, and I don't think I ever saw so many ships in my life. It was just, you looked around and there was all kinds of ships. There was a battleship firing away, and all kinds of ships.
Now, Frank, just so we make sure we get this on the tape, this is the invasion of Normandy.
This is, I'm big impressed. This is 5 days later. D plus 5. It was June 11th.
Okay.
The invasion was the 6th, and this was June 11th, 5 days. That's what it took us time to get down there.
So this is 5 days after D-Day.
Right.
5 days after the initial invasion of,
Yes.
of Normandy.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, tell us what.
Well, we late in the evening, or I guess it was, we went down the cargo nets off the ship into these LCIs and went in. Of course, we didn't have to wade through the water because by then they were a couple of miles inland, say the front was. So it was gloomy, rainy, miserable, and as you can imagine, tremendous turmoil. And but I guess then I dropped a lot of my gear, because then you're going to have to carry everything from there on. You carry what you have. That's it. So we just dropped a lot of gear, and I don't remember too much other than I saw a big field with it's Achtung Minen, meaning mines. So we avoided that, of course, and that was. And we saw a lot of meat wagons, but we called them ambulances. They would be coming out, and that wasn't too pleasant. So, but keep in mind that I didn't know very much about what was going on, and you sort of do as you're told. You go here, you're told to go here, and you go there. You just follow orders, and, and that was the way the whole thing went. So I think the next day they pulled me out and they assigned me to a field artillery battery.
That's kind of different for a guy who trained for infantry.
Yeah, that's it. They assigned me to a field artillery battery. So it was a 155 howitzer. It was the 345th Battalion. By then, I guess I surmised I was in the 90th Division. That was the division that I was replacing or going into. So I was in the 345th Battalion of that, and it was a 155 howitzer, a medium howitzer, and I looked at the muzzle of it, and there's Waterloo Arsenal, which is where it was made.
A slice of home.
Yeah. So I was in that for maybe less than a month, and I was what they call a cannoneer, and you'd prepare charges and set fuses and things like this, and we did a lot of firing. It wasn't a bad service, although we got hit right on the gun one night with a German 88, and killed the gunner and wrecked the gun a little. We took the gun out of service, and we had about a day off then. But that was, I thought, gee, I think I was probably maybe 10 miles behind the front. Well, the front would keep moving, and when it would get beyond 10 miles, then we'd move up close. So I was probably anywhere from, I don't know, a few miles to 10 miles behind the front, which seems safe. Well, safe as home, until we got hit one night. And as I say, well, we had a lot of close calls, but one night they clobbered us, and I realized I wasn't that safe. So one day I was summoned and told I was going back in the infantry. I guess that's the way they operate. When they're short here, they move people around. So I was going back, and I had my M1 rifle, which I kept, because the artillery guys wanted that rifle. They wanted to trade it. They carried carbines, which are light, but I didn't trade, and I was glad I didn't, because I had my old rifle, and so I went back, and I went to A Company of the 359th Regiment. There were 3 infantry regiments, 57, 8, and 9. So I went to that, and it wasn't a full squad. I guess we were all under strength, and I could see then why I went back. We had about 8 or 9 guys, and I stayed in that about a month. And we did a lot of walking, some fighting, and by then, the Battle of St. Lo had occurred. In fact, we took as artillery, we took a big part in that. We did a lot of firing, but at that point, it was up till that point, we were in hedgerow country, which was out on this Cotentin Peninsula, which is where the invasion took place. And peninsulas are tough to fight on because the enemy can defend them quite easily. And this was miserable because they had these hedgerows. They were fields. It was all agricultural country. There were fields, but they were surrounded by large mounds, which had a lot of brush and trees and bushes and everything on them. And they were great for defense. The Germans, they could hide behind them, and of course, when we were under an artillery barrage, we could hide behind them too, because they were great shelters. I never dug a foxhole because we were moving all the time, and you could just duck down behind these hedges, and of course the artillery would be coming in that way, and you'd be on the lee side, and it would go that way. So they were good protection. I never needed, as I say, a foxhole. And after this St. Lo, then the army broke out of the hedgerow country, and we got into more open country where the tanks could operate, and we started to move faster. And we were walking a lot. I remember 25-mile days easily. Sometimes we'd hop on a truck, but we were moving, and occasionally we'd have fights. And the Krauts, or Germans as we call them, Krauts, there were minor fights that they'd take off. We'd beat them, I guess, and so one day, it was a bigger fight, much bigger, but I got caught. Our squad was, it was again, it was like a country estate. There was a big high stone wall, and sort of on top of a hedgerow, and there was a hole in the wall, and we went through that. This is our squad now. We went through that into a field which was it was more of a forest. There was a lot of trees and everything were in there. And there were German holes in there that they had abandoned. Well, these were foxholes, and they had, of course, time to dig these things, and they were luxurious, big deep holes. So we were in those, and it was about noon, and I was getting ready to eat my K rations, and all of a sudden there's gunfire, and it's getting heavy, and I look out, and we see individuals, soldiers moving in the trees, and they're Germans. so they're right in the middle of dinner. Well, seriously, we started firing back at them, and we're exchanging fire. And I got into a hole which, as I say, I was about farthest from I got into a foxhole, which is farthest from the entrance hole through this wall. So I was the last one in, and also the last one out. And the word came down to get out of here. So I waited, and of course there's artillery fire coming into mortars, I guess, I don't know what, but all hell's breaking loose. And I went into a ditch that, well, as I say, I was in the hole with another guy, and I let him go out. And so I was the last one out, and I went into this ditch along a hedgerow. It was full of thorns. I didn't even feel them. I just crawled along there through all that stuff till I got to where the hole in the wall was. And there's a machine gun firing over me. And I waited, and it would be bursts, and so I waited until a burst stopped, and I dove through that hole head first. And I made it. I went tumbling down the other side. I got out there, and there's nobody around. None of our guys. So I went one way, and there's a bunch of crowds coming. They didn't see me then, and so I headed the other way. And so I was ducking from tree to tree, and then one time I looked out behind this tree, and I'm in somebody's sights. The guy has me, and there's a whole row of them, and so I thought that was it. I was waiting for the gun to go off and wondering what it's going to feel like, and nothing happened. So I slowly raised my hands, and he beckoned to me to throw my rifle down, which I did, and went over to him. And from then, that part of the war was over. They passed me back. Well, I don't know. That guy was good. As I say, he took me, and another guy wanted to shoot me. They bang your helmet off, and you feel naked without that helmet, because there's artillery coming in. And now I'm under American fire. So, so I didn't know any German. I didn't know anything, and they're jabbering, and I guess this guy, he pulls out his pistol, and the other guy stops him. Well, anyway, they hand me off down the column, and that was it. They put me. In fact, they put me in a Jeep, an American Jeep. I had never ridden in an American. I'd never ridden in a Jeep, but I had seen a lot of them. But I got a ride in an American Jeep from them. I went to they brought me to an aid station, and a medics, one of their medics, and because they were working me back, and that night I ended up in a barn, and in the dark they threw me into this barn. and I stumbled over something, and all of a sudden there's a lot of profanity in English. It sounded so good. I hadn't heard any English, but there were a couple of other GIs.
That was a good thing.
So I found out in the morning there were 2 more of them. And then later we found a lieutenant, a medic lieutenant joined us, an American. And so we kept working our way back, and there was a part of a B-17 crew joined us who had bailed out, see. And this little group kept getting bigger and bigger. In a couple of weeks, we rode on trucks, we walked up with them. And it wasn't very, the Germans, some Germans could speak a little English. They'd say, "View the war is over," And, we used to say the same thing to Germans, But it wasn't over, because we got, well, for example, right then there, a few days later, we got strafed by some English. And because this crowd sergeant, he was a miserable SOB, he made us walk along the road with them, see. And of course, we see these fighter planes going by, and fighter plane sees a column of men, there's only one thing to do. So they go down and they make their turn, and we're watching. And the next thing, I turn around and I see this, and you see him coming right at you head on. And I thought, meanwhile the sergeant's trying to keep it on. So I heck with the sergeant, just make a dive off the road. And the bullets hit all around you. But they missed me. And they got about a couple of the guys, I guess. And I think they got that sergeant too, which is a good deal. But from then on, you continually walk when you're watching the skies, which is, it was the life of a German soldier then, You're watching the skies, and we probably walked for a couple of weeks, and we got to a place called Chalons, I think. And eventually we got on a train, boxcars, and then we went to Frankfurt, a camp. It was a Stalag 12A, I think it was, at Frankfurt, near It was in Limburg, which is near Frankfurt in Germany. And we were there for probably a couple of weeks. Sort of like an induction center here, They were bringing in all the prisoners from the Western Front, or from that area. It was a good-sized camp. And we stayed there for a while, maybe a week or so. And then we boarded trains again, boxcars. And we were in the trains for, maybe 2 weeks at the most. And you're locked in, you don't have guards, they lock you in and you can't go anywhere. But there's planes strafing railroad cars and bombs. They're bombing. And of course, you're locked in there, and you're really sweating that out. You'd rather have a foxhole. But we did make it back to. Eventually I ended up down near Munich in Stalag 7A, which was in Moosburg, which was maybe 30 miles outside Munich. I was there till the end of the war, and we worked in Munich a lot. We were cleaning up bomb damage. Munich, the cities in Germany were leveled. Well, pretty much. As I say, we worked in Munich a lot. We were cleaning up rubble. I'd say, I don't think I saw a building that wasn't hit. They weren't flat, but they were pretty well, looked like an earthquake. But the people were going about their lives, as they say. They think they would take it more like a storm. Now at that time, Munich would get raided about every third week, because Germany was pretty big then. And but as the country shrank, as the two fronts moved in, then the country would be smaller, and the cities would be bombed more frequently. And so,
Frank, when you were there at Stalag 7A, what was the housing like? What was the food like?
well, there were barracks, and there are good sized barracks. I would say, well, I'll tell you, the size of the camp was, as the war was closing, the POWs from other camps in Germany would be marched down to ours. Now, ours was the last one to fall. And we had all kinds of prisoners. I've learned since then that they had something like 175,000 there when we were liberated. And these were, I mean, I had no idea that it was that size because you only see your own part of it. But I will say that one time when we were going into Munich, I estimated there was probably about 2,700 of us went into that particular day. Well, every day on the train. Because I counted, I think, 54 boxcars, and they would put 50 of us in a car, see. So I estimated it was about 2,700 of us. And we'd go in, and of course we'd get into the railroad yards in Munich, and then they would send us out into different parts of the city in groups of maybe 25 or so, and with a shovel, and you shovel and then back to camp. They get you back in the cars before dark, of course, and then you'd sit in the car and you'd wait for your low priority to get back to the camp. But I tell you that so that you can see the size of the camp. It was big, but we were all we had our own compound, so you couldn't tell. See, I didn't know that until after I got out, that there were that many in there. But we did have Russians and French and English. We saw some of them. And those poor English, they were there since 1942, since Africa, see. They had been there a few years. So the barracks they were warm, but the bunks were, there were 3 high, and they were probably in clusters of maybe 12 units, 12 people in a unit, and there were 3 high, and again we slept on straw. But it didn't take us long to get lousy. I mean, lice. And it was bad. and they spread. But that's the way it gets. The food was, we'd get potato soup and bread. At first I hated that bread. Well, that's all we got. When I first got caught, the German soldiers used to carry black bread, and I think that was their ration. But at first I didn't like it, sour, but then I got to love it. And it was very dense. It came by the kilo, and it was very dense, and I suppose nourishing, because they'd give us bread, and they'd give us a loaf for so many people, and you'd cut it up, and you'd get your chunk of bread, and you'd get potato soup, hot, it was potato soup. Maybe they'd wave meat over it. But once in a while we'd get a package from the Red Cross, which had to go through Switzerland, of course. But this would be a package of goodies, but you would get a package you'd have to split it up among a bunch of guys. And so that was, but in the package were cigarettes. And that was nice, because you can trade them. We would trade them for bread. That was the thing you wanted most, was bread. And we would trade the cigarettes for bread. My folks here at home were told to send cigarettes. I didn't smoke. I was lucky I didn't smoke, because I could use them for that. And so my folks were told to send cigarettes. I didn't get any, but that was why. And so we would trade them. In fact, it was lucky we went into Munich, because we would trade them with the civilians. And but the cigarettes became a commodity like money. It was a good course in economics, because as the supply of cigarettes went down, when you wouldn't get these Red Cross packages, you wouldn't have cigarettes, and so. Well, let me say, when you would have cigarettes, then the price of bread would go up. And the Germans knew their cigarettes. They wanted Camels, and Camels first, Lucky Strikes, then there was Old Goals, Philip Morris, things like that. And they preferred the Camels. In fact, they'd want you'd get more bread if you had Camels and things like that. So they say it was a good course in economics. Some guys I saw with $1 once. It was worthless. You know, it was $1. keep your dollar. You give me a cigarette. And guys who could cut hair. There were a couple of guys who could cut hair, and they would cut hair and charge you maybe 2 or 3 cigarettes. But that was the means of the units of exchange, and it was educational.
How were you treated by the Germans?
All right, they yell a lot, and they'd have us if you didn't behave, they'd have you out standing in the roll call. That was it, where they count you off. They were always counting you every morning and at night, and every time you get on and off a train, they're counting you, because that was the only means they had of keeping track of you. But they'd stand you up in the formation and then count you. As I say, they'd yell a lot. And one time, I saw them. They shot at one guy. The guards some of them were old, and I think there were guys who probably weren't fit for combat well, and they always had their pistols, and we thought, these guys are, phony cops. but during an air raid at camp, and there was an air raid, and they'd go over to camp to hit Munich, but they would. You had to stay in the camp, and there'd be barbed wire. The camp would be divided up into smaller compounds, and you'd have to stay in the barracks, and they'd put the police dogs in there, so if you went out of the barracks, the dogs were there, and they kept you in there, supposedly. Well, one time there was a raid. But the latrine was in another building outside, But one time at a raid, he ran from the barracks out to the latrine, and one of these older guards, he pulls out his pistol and bang, and he clipped him right in the back of the neck, as he was going into the latrine, And I thought, these guys, do not fool with them.
Yeah.
Well, they weren't as old as we thought.
Yeah. So how long were you there, Frank?
9 months. Well, from the time I was captured till, yeah. Well, then we were liberated in April, the end of April 29th of '45, and well, as the fronts closed in, as I say, the air activity was more frequent. And then we used to see fighters. When we first saw a fighter plane, wow, because then we knew some front was close enough for a fighter. So when we first saw fighters, we were encouraged. And then they became more frequent. And then one Sunday morning, in the end of April, we were out on a roll call, and this guy, he comes over and he starts barrel rolling, and he's trying to send us a message, And shortly after that, we hear gunfire, and well, by then it was imminent, because the guards were friendly, and the fences had holes cut in them, and they just gave up on us.
Really?
Yeah, and as they say, the guards were friendly, and so as I say, there was about a 2-hour fight. We heard the gunfire, And by then, I was living in a big circus tent. Because, as they say, they were moving people in from all these other camps. It was way overcrowded, so they put up this big tent. It was like a circus tent. And we were all in there, and you're just, you're living your home is a few square feet, you know. You're climbing over people, and of course we couldn't go to Munich by then. You know, the work details were over, and so well, we were in the tent there, and the fire, you know, the battle's going on, and in a couple of hours it was over. By then, the SS had charge of the camp. They defended the camp, and then as they say, it took about a 2-hour battle. And the 14th Armored Division, the American 14th Armored Division, liberated us, and they came in, and then we saw how the difference in the armies. The German army was sad. It was, and this I experienced on the trips back, the earlier trips that I was telling you about, the walking and all that. They'd have horses pulling wagons, and they had trucks burning wood. They were in rough shape. Well, of course, they had been fighting a long time. But as I say, then when the American Army came in, it wasn't long till I think that day, the engineers are running water pipes down through the streets, you know, where you got all these spigots now, we're getting water, and we're just amazed, and you see all this engineering equipment, you know, bulldozers and all that stuff. That they say the Germans just there was a different army. Yeah, well, don't lose a war. They were, you don't want to lose a war.
So, when you after the liberation,
we stayed there for about 2 weeks. We didn't know why. I think some big generals, personnel, I guess, came through. I didn't see them, but I guess they wanted to see it. And after a couple of weeks, they trucked us out to some airfield. It was quite a ways, and they lined us. Oh, there were these C-47s. They were the workhorses. And as I say, civilians might remember them as DC-3s. Well, they were all lined up, and we boarded those, and we flew to Reims, France. And I meant to mention I think the prisoners from Dachau probably worked in Munich too. In the railroad yards, that was the first thing we used to do was work in the railroad yards. There was a lot of us in there, but we think they were probably from Dachau because they had the striped pajamas, and of course they didn't mix. They weren't right close, but we could see them working on other tracks, you know. And Dachau was nearer to Munich than we were. And but so when we got to Reims, France, we got cleaned up. They took all our clothes and well, you just got rid of all your clothes and showered, got really clean. And they dusted us with powder and I suppose burned the clothes. And we were free of bugs. Free of bugs at last. And fed us. And they gave us all we wanted to eat, and we'd get sick. But it was, well, we were treated royally then. And we eventually, we went from Reims, we were there a while, and then we went up to a Camp Lucky Strike, which is up near Le Havre, I think, near on the coast. And we waited there a while on board of the ship. This time it was a Navy transport, which was a little more comfortable. And come home. And we landed in New York, and we went to a Camp Kilmer, which was another one of these camps like Shanks. Apparently they had these camps around the ports of embarkation that were not known. So we went to Camp Kilmer, and they were there a few days, I guess, where they processed us again. And I called home, and they sent me home for, this was now probably June of 45, and I got a 72-day leave. That was, wow, that was like a discharge. And they gave me gas ration stamps for that 72 days. And I got home, and this relative with whom I lived, she said, oh boy, she says, oh, I had to report back 72 days later up to camp, or rather Lake Placid. And again, they were treating us well. And we went to the Lake Placid Club. And so she says, what we'll do is we'll save these stamps and we'll go up there, we'll use them to go up to Lake Placid with you. And that's what we did. And so I went to Lake Placid, again, more processing. Where do I get sent back down to Camp Croft in South Carolina, where they're still training infantry. And so there I helped them out a little bit, and just bided my time for a couple of months till I got out. And that was, see, that would have been in September or October, and then I got out in December when they got around to it. They say there were a lot of people to discharge then. So I got home, and that was it. Oh, I stayed home for, well, I got home on the 16th of December, about 2 weeks before Christmas. And I went back to work in Bear Manning's right after New Year's. And I got my old job back, and there I was.
Like nothing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, now did you work for Bear Manning for?
I worked there another year and a half. I worked there from a year and a half from the time I got out of high school till I got drafted. And when we got out of high school, we expected to get drafted right away. Apparently our draft board in Troy had a lot of people, because I didn't get drafted, as they say, for another year and a half. But every month you'd expect to go. And so when I did go, and that was it. So when I come back, I went to work right away, and I worked there a year and a half before I realized that this isn't for me. And because I had the GI Bill, and so I had applied in RPI in Siena, and RPI first said, no, they can't. At that time, I couldn't get in. Well, then I later learned that the Navy didn't use one of their slots in their quota. That they had people over there. So RPI said, you live in Troy? And I said, oh, they were looking at my application again. And I said, you know, it's been 5 years since I got out of high school. They said, well, we'll give you some tests. So they gave me about 3 days of tests. And they said, at the end of those 3 days, they said, you should be all right. Because especially, you know, they could account for the fact that I was out for 5 years out of high school. Because I had good grades in high school. And
So what did you study there, Frank?
mechanical engineering. I went there for 4 years and got a bachelor's of mechanical engineering. Then I went to work in Waterville Arsenal, because one summer, one of the summer jobs I had while I was there was at the Arsenal. It was in June of '50 when the Korean War opened. And so they hired me there, and I liked it. I began to use a lot of the stuff I was learning. And so I went back. Oh, I got married. I got married the day after I graduated.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I went with my wife for I had been going with her for over 4 years, and so we agreed that, well, we had set the date and the day after I graduated, and so I guess we went on the honeymoon. A week after I graduated, I went to work in the arsenal, and I stayed there for over 30 years.
Oh,
and
that's neat. And you had a good career.
Oh, it was a good career. As I said, I was probably lucky I didn't get in the Navy, or might be on the bottom of an ocean.
Now, when you, and so you've lived here in the Latham area ever since?
Well, yeah, no, for the first 5 years after I was married, working in the arsenal, I lived in Green Island. And that was very handy. But we were renting, and the kids started coming along. And after 2 kids, the third one was born down there. And by then we were looking for another place. So I found this house on Holly Lane, and we've been there ever since. And another one was born there, so we ended up with 4 kids.
Oh, that's great.
And they, let's see, 2 of them went to RPI, and my daughter went to Siena, and my oldest son went to Hudson Valley, and then he went into the troopers. He went into the Marines, served a hitch there, and went into the troopers, where he is now.
Oh, that's good. As you look back on your experience, Frank, in the service and as a POW, did that affect the rest of your life?
Well, not seriously, but it certainly gives you a different outlook. We were hungry all the time. As I say, as a POW, we were just hungry all the time. So I think now, sometimes when I get a meal or something I don't like, I say, gee, I think there was a day when I'd give my right arm for this, and it makes it taste so much better.
Must be said for that.
Yeah, as I say, when you think you got things rough here, you say, gee, yeah, there was a day when I'd welcome this.
Frank, I've asked you about all the questions that I have. Is there anything you'd like to add to the interview?
No, that was, I've been extremely lucky and well blessed to have it come out like this. Say it.
That's a good thing. Well, I want to thank you for doing the interview, and you really did a great job, and I appreciate you taking the time, and certainly, we're proud of the service you gave to this country.
Well, people say that, but everybody in our generation went through similar things. There's just differences, but it all amounts to the same. It's everybody. I don't deserve any more than others of my generation.
Well, again, Frank, thanks for doing this.
Well,
Great interview. Thank
you're welcome.